Welcome to the 7th rendition of the double feature lecture series here at Living the City. Living the City is an exhibition, a publication, and a program of events about cities, about people, and about stories. My name is Lukas Feireis. I'm part of the curatorial team. And on behalf of the curatorial team, which is Tatjana Schneider and Digvila Eyal, I would like to welcome you all. Thank you for being here. The setup is every Thursday the same. I will briefly introduce our speakers, and then we will each have, or you will all have, roughly 20 minutes for your presentation, and we will ask a few questions. Tonight, we have 3 people with us. That's Nele Heinevetter and Niels Philipp Dommert of the Art and Architecture Tours Niche Berlin, as well as choreographer and dancer Franka Marlene Foth. So thank you for being with us. The common denominator of tonight's talks, and it's actually quite funny because the way we're put together is coincidental. It's random. We kind of just checked who is available on what dates, but it's, you know, everything falls into place. There's always great connections, and today there is actually a strong common denominator, and that's 2 very essential necessities of life. One is physical movement, whether it's walking through the city or it's dancing through the city or just dancing, and physical shelter, architecture, space, that what surrounds us. And both of these are focused on the same basic material, that's the body and that's space. So I'm now very much looking forward to your presentations. Let's start with you, Nele and Niels Philipp of Niche Berlin. We just before briefly talked to reflect upon when we originally met, and I think there was a couple of years ago, Nele, when we were both invited to a dinner or symposium in the most like original sense of the word, like a get-together over food and discussion. And yeah, thrilled to hear what you have to share with us under the title Finding the City tonight. Niche was founded by you, Stefanie Gerke. Both of you are art historians, and Katharina Beckmann, trained as an architect and architectural historian. You are a multidisciplinary team of art historians and architects, but also, I suppose, heritage conservators and artists. And you offer private and personalized art and architecture tours through the city, meaning finding special places, hidden gems, whether it's artistically speaking or architecturally speaking. So the screen is yours, and thanks for being here.
So first of all, thanks for inviting us today. And Niels Philipp is here because Stefanie and Katharina, who I founded Niche Berlin with, weren't available today. And we've been a team from the beginning. And I think, yes, we do offer tours, but not only. I will tell you about this later, but it all started with the idea that even us living in this city of Berlin, we had a hard time to keep track what happened in like the latest art spaces, what were the most recent buildings that were just inaugurated, what's like the coolest building that have been built in the last 50 years, but weren't the most obvious to see. So we were like, why don't we offer these tours for people that are exactly looking for what we would actually like to know? And it started small with like individuals, like small groups that told us beforehand what they were actually wanting to see, but very soon it became a bigger endeavor, and we almost became like a proper agency within 3 years, I would say, working with a team of, you said it, architects and art historians and artists. And each of these people had their very specific niche of interest that helped us to cater to very specific demands by our clients, which by the time were then like architecture offices from Switzerland, or it could be a company like Google, or it would be a public authority like the Senate. And they all had very specific needs, like what's the latest green architecture in Berlin? Which artist is female and works with video games? Or I don't know, like what's the best wood building in the at the moment. So we had this very big team, and Niels Philip, he's like one of our architects that we've been working with on a very frequent basis. And so we started roaming the city and we explored different districts. And what happened then is that we kind of settled. We found this space in Bedding, hinter den Vögeln, which is like an old flower shop in Soldiner Kiez. And we started doing our own projects. And I think like engaging with the neighborhood on like in a more thorough way changed how we approach the tours in a long term as well. So we did our own shows with artists from the neighborhood, like Gregor Hildebrandt is working close by, Dirk Bell was working close by, Jean-Pascal Flavien, and people like these had their offices there, and we asked them to realize projects for us. And most importantly, and I think this is also the reason why we met, we started a project called Making Spaces together with Valérie Chartrain and Rosario Talevi, Miriam Stoney, and Christina Landbrecht. We started to look into the role of women in spatial practices, and it was all about like how can we connect females, like female architects, or how can we heighten the visibility of urbanists, architects, curators, whoever is there that isn't unfortunately still as visible as a man, and how can we bring them together? And we started doing this series in Contemporary Food Lab. That's why they connected us, because we did the series there at the same time as the symposium. And so everyone had to answer questions on a placemat, basically. You can see them here on the right-hand side. Before they could leave the table, and in between we had a discussion about different topics that we were interested in at the time. We also did tours with specific, like free tours we did with experts on specific fields. We did also workshops with children from like refugee children from a nearby shelter. And we did like discussions, and we invited a resident architect, and we did parties. We lost the space, so the cemetery didn't extend the lease due to our activities, and this led us to kind of focus more on the tours again. And since we're like talking about living the city, we thought it would be nice if Niels Philip could give more thorough examples of what is actually specific to our tours, or also to our approach of architecture tours, and what makes it different than your usual I will show you the big monuments, or we walk you through all the city kind of tour. So.
Yeah, what we discussed beforehand, what I actually really liked is that Niche started as that company that did this concept of off the beaten tracks to find hidden gems, as you put it, Lucas. But basically then became something more of behind the scenes. And what we really love and what we engage with is meetings with the protagonists, as we call them. So with the artists, with the curators, or in the architectural context, with the architects and urban planners that we approach directly. And of course, over the years, the ladies especially have built a network of the architects that we can meet, and I think our luck is that the clients, as you described them, that we're really lucky with them, that they are so engaged and really interested in the respective subjects actually that they approach us with. So then what we do is research. Which is very nice. No, it's very research based. They basically give us a task, as Nele put it. One is, and this is why we're showing here the 4 plans. One, we were approached by students from the ETH Zurich with a professor, of course, and they were looking for wasteland in the inner ring, basically in Berlin, to realize as a student project, obviously. A mega structure, as they called it. So a little similar to the Maison d'Habitation, they had this idea that vertical cities or mega structures can work, but they have to have a critical mass. So all the examples in Berlin, for example, they're way too small. And well, then as you can see here, it was the easiest way to approach this via Google Maps actually, and see where the biggest wastelands are, and then go on site and see if they're still wasted, if they're still abandoned, and afterwards obviously to go into deeper research, whether there is planning for the future, whether there are projects or even competitions and so on. So the 4 examples, as you can see, it's pretty much pointed out. Most of it's being built, but what we can focus on is the Friedenauer Höhe, as it's called. I think it's a typical rendering, how you can now find it for the project developers. That's at Innsbrucker Platz, actually. Of course, in all the grey blocks, they're unbuilt. The tours that we took, we looked at over a dozen sites actually on 2 days with these 40 or so students, and we came prepared. I think it was March with rubber boots and umbrellas. And what I loved about this is that it was so raw and basically nothing was to see, but this was exactly what they needed, was an empty site for their creativity, for their imagination. So we ended up discussing this. And of course, what is never to be underestimated, the way how we do this is by walking. That is so important to us, not only to put the projects, may they be built or unbuilt, in historical context, and Berlin has so much of that, but in the geographical one, like how do I approach this as a passerby, for example, how do I approach this as a neighbor in that neighborhood? What is the immediate context? So our approach is very, very local. And to add to this, of course, what's quite fantastic is, as I said, to meet the protagonists, to meet the architects. This is for us, I would say, a typical example of an architecture where the structure behind that architecture of why this is way more interesting than the architecture itself, which is decent, fair enough. But what makes this one, for example, really special is, as you might know, it was the first, actually the sort of a competition. Berlin was to sell the plots, but not to the highest bidder, but to the ones with the best concept. And what came out is one of the squares we think with the most urban potential in Berlin. All the 3 projects surrounding that square at the Jewish Museum that were finished in 2018, among them the Metropolenhaus. And the concept with which they won was to finance basically the goings on in the ground floor, the 5 project spaces that they have there, with selling the living units upstairs, for example. What you can see here, how the concept's been realized, and pretty much a realization of the vision that the architects had. So basically they became curators, yeah, the role of the architect enlarged in a way. We approached this a lot, and we're very lucky that, for example, the architects here are very talkative and like to invite, like to invite the people over. I think they're still looking for tenants for the restaurant downstairs. They want to. Where was it with Stefanie? Whatever. So they're still pretty much engaged of what is going on there. If Lucas, perhaps you might know this project. You can rent the space basically for, I think, €6 per square meter. So they really try to keep it affordable, actually, for non-commercial, non-profit projects. And that is only one of the 3, which is very nice. A personal highlight of mine.
And of mine.
And you were with me.
Yeah,
yes. That was very nice. Johannes Uhl, one of the architects of the Neues Zentrum Kreuzberg, we could actually win him over to comment on the project, to hold a presentation. It was an architectural office from Switzerland, so we did the tour for, and of course also they were very much excited. So basically we ended up, obviously pre-corona times, very cramped in one space in that gallery floor that the Zentrum Kreuzberg has, and this 70-plus-year-old man actually lived up and very much brought to life this vision that he and his partner had.
He brought a staple
then.
of copies, like so many copies
one
for all
copy for each. Here you can see some of them literally hand drawn. He brought it from his home. And what I just told Nele before the talk is that, of course, during my studying architecture, this modern approach to architecture, postmodern approach, all the examples in the city from this time, we're like talking late 60s, early 70s, was pretty much historical positions in a way. And then there was that man, that architect, was pretty much alive, and also in a way could convince me of the beauty of that concept, even though the realization thereof, as we all know, turned out to be a failure, or let's say at least highly problematic, and not all work the way it should, and criminality is very high, and so on and so forth. But of course, it had to do with the surrounding factors. We were blessed that he could present us actually his pure vision thereof. And I think these are the moments for why we do these tours. Afterwards, as you can imagine, everybody was pretty happy.
Yeah, and we'll always see Zentrum Kreuzberg with different eyes, we hope. And yes. I think this is also something that is very important to us. And as you can imagine, 2020 was a terrible year for us because we basically couldn't tour, and partners we usually work with canceled their events, and we had to kind of come up with new formats. And so basically we just have two examples of the very few things we did this year. We did, as usual, the social media or influencer tour for Berlin Art Week. And this year we had to use a double-decker bus, you know, these big Berlin sightseeing buses that are actually open air, and also try to find spaces where people had enough space to not come too close to each other. And then for another client we work with on a regular basis, we, instead of doing a workshop, because this is also a format we started to do, like artist workshops for specific clients, we made a Zoom workshop where she had everyone like perform with her, and everyone had to, like, you couldn't black yourself out, but everyone had to go full in. And Kira is like based in, I believe it's LA. And she's crazy, like very good, like, but like, it's very demanding. And I was really impressed that the clients would go with this. And this kind of gives an idea of what the people are actually looking for that are booking us. It's like they really want to meet the people. They really want to explore the sites. They want to get to know the city better. And that makes it so rewarding for us that we get to work with clients that are, yeah, basically super interesting themselves. And so I guess, yeah, we can,
they keep us curious also.
Yeah, they keep us curious, and that's like why finding the city is, I think, what we're still doing after more than 10 years.
Yeah.
That's it from our side.
Thank you so much. Maybe I would like to pick up on the on one of your like forms of exploring or finding the city, namely the walking. You both mentioned this, you know, equipped with rain boots and an umbrella, or how important the routine of walking is when experiencing the city or finding these places, which is, if you think of it in a long historic line of like people physically moving to the city and exploring, from the literal figure of the flaneur who walks to the city, you know, more than 19th century thing, or the dérive of the situationist to kind of just drift to the city and create kind of some kind of a psychogeography, or the traqueur, the parcours kind of form of going to the city. But this is kind of an essential part of your exploration too. And I was wondering if you could elaborate really on the daily routine or the routine practices of walking.
Well, I would say that, like, to be honest, like, even if we meet in private, we try to walk a lot, and sometimes we do a lot of excursions where we meet somewhere, like especially Niels Philipp and I, we like to take excursions where we really just walk with open eyes through a neighborhood, because you just see things differently. And of course, like, on a very profound level, like for every tour, we have to go like physically to every location beforehand and have to see how can you actually access it, what are the angles you can view it from, how can you explain it, where do you have to be positioned to experience an architecture. Like let's think of Zentrum Kreuzberg, it looks so different, like depending on where you're positioned, or like a wasteland. I mean, where do you position students in a wasteland so that they can imagine future uses? Like how can they best see the urban context of the site? To kind of, yeah, I think it's, for us, it's super important how people position themselves in the architecture or in the city.
Yeah, I remember, for example, for the student tours that we deliberately declared the whole Tempelhof Airfield as a wasteland, as the city's biggest wasteland. So basically what we did, I mean, it's ultra famous in a way, of course, also for the students it was, but what we did was we walked from one end to the other. And that was all we did basically. But it's interesting that it was not so much a visual experience. I mean, it is this wideness, but a very physical one. That literally just to walk to realize how big it actually is. Because we all walk more or less the same pace, I don't know, 5 to 6 kilometers, whatever. So when someone says it takes 20-minute walk, it basically takes 20-minute walk for everyone. And that is a lot. No, it's longer than 10 minutes, for example, or in this case, we walk over half an hour. It's walking, walking, walking. And I think this gives a sense of space that you cannot obtain in any other way.
Yeah, I was thinking, and this is going a bit theoretical, but we come to the practical application of things. In the discourse, when we talk about walking through the city, usually Michel Desartaux is mentioned, like a theorist who got very famous for a big book called The Practice of Everyday Life. He kind of analyzes certain like routine practices, and one of them is actually an entire chapter called Walking in the City, and where this kind of fits to what you're saying, where he opposes two things, a strategic view and a tactical view. And he says, basically cities as such, by city planners and architects, they are generated by strategies of like a government or some kind of institutional body. And then there's also the walker, like you know, who at a street level kind of moves in ways that are actually tactical. Strategic is the top down, tactical is the bottom up. And thereby they're never fully determined by the original plans of, let's say, the institutional bodies. Yeah. That's, I guess, what you're experiencing too. No? You can approach a topic on an abstract level, or you have a client approaching you who would like to find something out, but being on the ground is a whole different ball game.
Yeah, yeah. And if you then get the architect to explain to you what he actually wanted to do, while you experience something completely different as like approaching the building or like moving within, that's quite interesting. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about what your impression is, but more and more also with building architecture, with structures, it becomes image obsessed, which we can see with the perfection of the renderings, for example. And that is almost exclusively one perspective. And what I think we've found out in our practice is that via walking, you can find out whether a structure actually works or not, because this is a factor that's so often not taken into consideration. Now, there's so many examples for when like, things look nice or on paper the structure of the program does, but you cannot use it. And what does it mean using on an urban level? This is walking, no?
Also, your exhibition works like that as well, no? I mean, it's also about like walking through different scenographies and exploring different topics, being positioned differently, like depending on what the topic actually is, and like also having different perspectives and insights, no?
Totally. There's a beautiful bridge actually topically also to now the work of Marlene, no? And thanks for mentioning the exhibition. Yes, indeed, we kind of created two different pathways and not one that you have to follow, but there's many options, no? You could explore the space in many different ways. But how are we exploring the city, the space with our body? No, and this is where we come to now to the work of Marlene, and it opens up. This is a little side note for us, and it, like another really interesting, let's say that one of the most famous, let's say, analogies in Western reception of cities is that between the body and the city. No, so this is also something that goes like since antiquity or like all the way to modernism. There's this very prominent pair of city and human body relations, whether it's in Plato or Aristotle, or it's the Vitruvius concepts or Da Vinci, and it kind of runs all the way to Chandigarh by Le Corbusier and so on and so forth, where the city is described as an organism, actually as a bodily organism. So this is kind of my nice hook now to you, Marlene. Thank you both for sharing your work. Maybe afterwards we can all talk together a little bit more. Now Marlene, or Franka Marlene Foth, is with us. We met via our common friend Sophia Bavas originally a couple of years ago, and I thought actually when that was, and it was actually when you performed as a duo alongside a DJ set, quite a wild one. And then I kind of followed your work, and then I think we touched base again about a year ago when you curated or choreographed like a larger piece of many people inside like a luxury department store in Berlin. Then I thought, okay, Marlene, we have to reconnect. So yes, you are working in many different media. You are a dancer and a choreographer, a director, and in an interview that I read that you gave in Vogue, you were called a performance curator. That's a new term that I hadn't heard before, but I like a lot. I think that's a perfect description also of what I've seen of what you do. And you work also in a multidisciplinary kind of world, a sphere of both like culture and commerce, of stage and theater, but also film, music, fashion productions as well. And you collaborate with artists from very diverse backgrounds, diverse fields, diverse media. And for the opening of Living the City, you choreographed and performed alongside two dancers and a musician, a completely new, like in situ piece, like literally inside the exhibition, reacting to the space of the exhibition. So thank you for being here, and the screen is now yours.
Thank you. I also, when you two talked, I was already thinking about all the transitions I can make. So am I sharing the screen already? No. I'm going directly here. You see it?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to do the transition because I found very interesting what you were just talking about, especially what comes to my mind is that I'm from Berlin, so I see the city sometimes totally differently, and I'm not so aware. So I'm walking in the streets and I'm not looking, and I'm not aware of what is this building or what I actually want to see. This is totally different when you travel to other places, because this is also why you travel and you explore cities or spaces so much more differently. And that's why for me sometimes it's actually hard to stay curious, or it's a constant process of finding new spaces within my own city. And especially now, and this is the first project also, so you see here with the dancer on the balcony, this is also shot in Wedding on in a building and a location where I grew up around the corner, but I never looked at this place like for a possible location or that I want to put dance there. I collaborated here with a friend of mine. She's a director, and she saw this building and she really liked it. And I was like, what? You like that? Well, yeah, I passed this all my life, but I never looked at it in that way. And then when I saw what she saw in it, I of course saw it as well. So this was a very interesting process and experience. And this is what I was just talking about, that I have to force myself sometimes to look at places differently, and especially also the architecture in my own city. I'm super interested in architecture. It inspires me a lot, and you can see it here in this project. I did this like 3 years ago. I choreographed a live performance, and then the collaboration took place with the director. She saw this building and we thought, okay, let's just put the dancers in here. How can they adapt? How can the architecture influence them? What is the overall mood? Because of course, every building, all the surroundings is influencing the body, and or especially the images I have in my head. I also like the term you used before, like being imagery obsessed or obsessed with images. I am definitely. It all happens here. And of course, when I create choreography, I always look for the perfect location, for the perfect aesthetics, if it's not a stage. So stage, obviously, you can also build different things on a stage. But when I talk about video production, or in a more commercial way, I always think, where can I put the bodies? So in this case, I put it in this building, which is close to Brunnenstraße. And we just asked the people who live there if we can shoot on their balcony, and they said yes. So that was kind of spontaneous because we didn't know if the people are home or whatever. So on that shooting day, we just asked them. So I put the dancers up there, and I was down there with like a megaphone, and I put them up there. And this is where it's actually a video, it's a short film. But these are the pictures, and I just let the pictures speak for themselves a bit. This is the same building. It has like 4 different colors, and we were really lucky also with the light, which of course influences all the stuff I create. And here you can see it super well. And we had no rented lights for this. This was just the sun. And before, of course, this was not spontaneous. Like we went there 2 days before, and I placed the choreography and the bodies, especially on places where I saw, oh, here's a nice shape, here's like a round thing of the corner, or the light hits here in a direct way, and that's where I positioned them. A year later, I found another location at Sonnenallee, kind of a similar vibe. And here I also walked through as well. This area I knew as well, like since years. And when I walked through, I was checking where is it interesting to put actually movement and the body as a contrast, because this is all like very clean and sharp and almost like brutalism. So, and if you have dancers and bodies in there, you have this disruption of the space, which I really like. And if you work with colors as well. And then it's also interesting, wherever you put the focus or the camera, a bit from above, from down, you get different perspectives. So it changes completely what you see and what you feel and how I want the dancers to move. And this is the same thing, as you can see. So here I am basically walking around buildings or the city and just thinking what images inspire me and how can I put the body in there. And then of course I see the movements and I adapt the movements to the space, or the other way around. It always depends. Then totally different mood, another project. We had this old building. I don't know if it still exists. And when I get, for example, here, I got the location first. And every location I get, all the images, the moods I get beforehand, they inspire on how I want the bodies to move within the space. Here, for example, is this group, they're not really using the space. They are like a unison within the space and not really touching the walls or not really including this big hall. So it's just there as a picture. So it's a totally different approach than the projects before. This also something totally different. This is in like 2 gallery spaces. One on the right side is the church old church, and these two were live performances. And of course, also here, I always do a recce, we call it, to check the location before, to check the space, how it looks, what the colors are, what the fabrics are. Here on the left side, I had these mirrors and a reflection of the light, and the depth and the height and of the ceiling is also a big influence on how I want to position bodies in space, and also what possibilities and opportunities to have actually to move. Because here on the left side, there was not so much space, so the movements are more contained and more compressed, which is super interesting because it's always different. And also, of course, if you have an audience, it's always different. This was the performance at Living the City. Huge space, huge possibilities, but because of the whole exhibition, we also had to see where I put the dancers and myself. We were actually wishing for this this year, but we were not allowed to use it, unfortunately. Maybe next time. But yeah, that was super interesting because you always have to find new ways and new inspirations, especially when you have people watching, like what is most effective? How can you enhance the body within the space so that you don't block out the space? You have to include it. You have to give enough space for the bodies, for the dancers. So it's really a combination always of both, or at least I try to find it, that it really fits and merges together. This is me working on stage. So here, for example, I had a very limited space and where you cannot really include, or yeah, then you just have to come up with other ideas of what inspires you and how to form everything with the bodies. If you have kind of a simple room, a simple space with plain colors, then it's really just about the movements and doing architecture with bodies, which is what I do. Like that, for example. And then, of course, that was a rehearsal, that was the performance. And then another project, which is very, very interesting, like here you have no idea where it is and what it is, but we actually had a very simple room and we did all the work with lights. And here as well. And I couldn't really choose what the surrounding was. So if you have a very clean space, you just have to, you have basically all the possibilities and all the directions your body can go. But sometimes it's even a bit too free because you have to have kind of an aesthetic frame you put the bodies in. So yeah, this is some kind of studio work. And, or this, and this influence, this is me. And this, of course, influences immediately everybody's mood when you see that. And I, for example, also try to break the first ideas you have when you, for example, see a space like this. Yeah, it's very romantic. It's, everybody gets already like a certain idea. And with movement, I try to again disrupt it and bring something else to it and find the twist in it instead of doing like a totally classical romantic thing. So yeah, sometimes it's really merging together and it's a game from both sides, and sometimes I like to really create a contrast to the space I actually see. Yeah, and that was it from my side so far.
Thank you, beautiful. You super beautiful works, and again, thank you for kind of being part of our opening weekend for Living the City.
Yes,
it was really special, and for everyone that was there, and it meant a lot to us as the curatorial team because we really wanted the view of a dancer or choreographer of the space and of the exhibition. And you said just before that kind of you do architecture but with bodies. And in a way, you could also describe dance as form, yet extended in time. when we saw you saw now, we saw all like moments, frozen moments of these dancers, but they're actually always moving. No? But in this frozen moment, you understand the tectonics of things. And I've been thinking that what I said also in the beginning, space is experienced through the body itself, no? And through comparison, like with and in relation to other bodies. So the human body, our body, they will not only occupy space, I'm sitting in this room, you're sitting in your room, etc., but we actually, the body defines it. So as a choreographer, you're extremely aware of this relationship, which is kind of our natural relationship to our environment, but it's more conscious in that sense. And yeah, that's why I'd like to hear a little bit more about your view on your engagement with the city. I suppose as being trained as a contemporary dancer, you do kind of, you probably learn how to respond or be responsive to the side of the performance, no, or the quality of the space. And you have elaborated already on it, but maybe you can go a little bit further there.
You mean just how space influences my body and movement? And
your work as a choreographer. You said like, sometimes you see pictures and you start to develop an idea already. Then maybe it's different when you come there. Just as Nele described before, you have an idea and then you come to the site, it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah, totally.
And also how much happens in the moment, or how much like chance is also given. So for those that are not choreographers, kind of share a little bit your process really on how you, the step-by-step.
So basically I work super intuitively as well, and it always really depends on the project. If the mood is already really strongly given, or the space I work in, or the location, or if I'm totally free in creating something, or if it's just the sound given to me first. So I just really create choreography, and the space and the surrounding comes way later. So this is always different. And because, yeah, I'm a perfectionist, but still, and I had to learn that I work still quite intuitively, especially because I always want to be able to still adapt, and also to adapt in the moment, because sometimes what I think is great today is not great tomorrow for my own taste anymore. So I always keep like 30% open for adaptation and changes when I actually come into the space or in the surrounding and the location. So because how the room makes you feel, also as a choreographer, that's why I like to work with really good dancers, because sometimes I change it in the last second, because suddenly the room, the lighting gives me another feeling. This is not always possible, but that's why I like to visit spaces beforehand, so I know exactly what can happen, what the possibilities are, but I always leave space for adapting in the end. And I think that's super important, because you also never know how the body's really responding and behaving in the space as long as you're not there. So you always have to see what actually happens when you're on spot. And how it influences me big time. Like I think me and dancers or athletes in general, we are super aware of our body all the time. And I'm super sensitive to everything, to the weather, to heat, cold, body, smell. So it all like plays a role in what I do and how I feel, and also how I want to move. And music, of course, but that's another topic. So yeah, the approach is always to, like I said before, to enhance both sides. So make the space shine, but also make this body shine, of course. And this is my main goal, to make the movement count. And there's, yeah, to find the right balance for this.
I'm sorry, did I interrupt you? No, but I thought now what connects also the three of you is that these movements are tools of storytelling. No? You're both in very different ways also storytellers. This is a very big topic within our exhibition, Living the City, because we had this narrative approach that we said we want to, this is an exhibition about cities, people and stories. We want to approach and make it as accessible through like stories. And in a way, your dances, the choreographies is like a form of storytelling. And to me, the way, you know, the dancers, the performers interact with it, the way if we focus on your tours, in particular for Niche, that's also an alternative way of storytelling.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I think like good architecture also gives space for stories. Like for example, when Niels showed the example of Metropolenhaus, where there is the Feld 5 space, which is some sort of cultural exhibition space, and we showed a few installation shots at the moment, like a former guide of ours, Sandra, she's presenting a project there where there's projections every night, and it's an architecture that was built with the idea that there would be a free space for people to explore art, but also to curate art. And I think this is also because I mean, we talk just about architecture, but we're also doing art tours. So for us, most of the good art spaces aren't interesting spaces. So to say, oh, we found a lot of interesting architecture because we are actually going to young art spaces and vice versa. So this is really intertwined. And yeah, so I think, yes, when you say as a dancer, you're super sensitive to your environment, I think a lot of artists are, and like a lot of architects are also very sensitive towards art. No, so it makes sense, kind of.
What I feel as like absolutely not a dancer, but why my fascination with dance and choreography, it's almost for me like an almost extreme or exaggerated form of how we relate to space anyways. No, you know, I'm always thinking like the extreme version, but the Oskar Schlemmer Bauhaus triadic ballet, no, he said this thing that like our bodies and our movements are in constant dialogue with our buildings. And that's the case on an everyday level when we wake up, when we go to work, when you go home. But dance in that sense is the extreme or the exaggerated kind of form of that. And that's it shows something that we do anyways, but through the exaggeration, for me, then I actually see it really, the strong relationship.
Or we would never do it all. I think that's something that makes dance so interesting, like that they think how to use a space a way we would never think of it, no? It's like more than like just exaggerate what we do as normal users.
Well, so you want to say something? Sorry.
Yeah,
quickly.
No, what I love about the dance is that...
No, ladies first, let's go with it.
Yeah, I just had a thought, yeah, because you also said like you put your students on different spots for them to see actually what is possible. And this is also this is what I try to do also with dancers, to interrupt or disrupt like a space or a building, like what is actually, or I do this with camera choreography, with camera movement. How can I actually show this part of the building, this part of the architecture in a way that you would normally not see it if you just walk through it? Because normally you walk through it, you watch it, but what if you're upside down, or if you lay on the floor, you have a totally different perspective. And this is a lot of my approach goes to how can I put the body in space for it not to seem normal? Yeah, for it to be like a bit more abstract. Or I know sometimes this is even overdone, but I find it very interesting also what you said, to see it from different perspectives and to see bodies in the space from a different perspective than just a normal human walking through it. So that's just what I wanted to say.
Yeah, good point.
And so what I think dancing can do, and what we so often forget when we talk about architecture space in a theoretical way, is that it makes us feel something. And why isn't this a just criterion? No, like we talk about the program, we talk about the concept. In more architectural terms, we would even talk about style. Of course, we don't do this anymore. But what we rarely talk about is like, how does it make us feel? And dance is really the way it was presented in your pictures, which by the way are absolutely beautiful, is that it can make us feel something No, and we have, I think, two basic moods. Every one of us is either we feel comfortable or not. And that would be a way, I think, to approach urbanism, architecture in general, to ask, like, why do we feel uncomfortable? Not because of the program, not because of the structure, but it has to do with the relation between the body and the space. And this must be changed, or can be changed or altered in a way. No, and it's a beautiful sentiment, actually, to have the, as Nele put it, also or you put it, the exaggerated form of movement in order to find out, how do I feel, where are my limits, and where are the obstacles, and so on.
Yeah, beautiful thoughts. I couldn't agree more. And now bringing it back to us and the exhibition again, both of these things is something that was that we kind of hope kind of achieved in. Literally by having different angles and having like different photographers taking pictures of a site or the project that we maybe know, but from a completely different angle, more like on a street level, on a like more human level, and create a space that causes emotional reactions that you kind of feel comfortable or uncomfortable, whatever, but that you react to. You're not in a white cube. This was very important to us. But when I now kind of think and about everything that we discussed here tonight, and kind of coming also to an end, I realized that both of your practices, as diverse as they may seem in the beginning, turn out to be like explicitly topological. I mean, meaning they study and they relate to concrete places and spaces and locations, and thereby offer, you called it like an alternative perspective or an alternative reading of our built environment. Both of you in many ways. And maybe wrapping up also the body of the city, we could say in both of your cases, only takes form through the interplay with our bodies, or the bodies of the citizens. The citizens make the city as such. Yeah, and this is again for me beautiful, a random kind of blind date that we have, not intended, that you guys are mixed together tonight, suddenly becomes such a good match. No? And this happened now almost every session that we had here. And I'm very, very grateful for that.
Maybe due to your selection of participants?
Yes, obviously they all fit, and you would probably fit also with the next speaker next week. But sometimes, I don't know, I totally believe in these kind of
generation of people that are just also curious about what is there and how it can be used or changed, or like thought like for future use that we're all part of, thankfully.
We want change. We want change.
We want change.
Yeah, that said, guys, thank you so much for being with us. We can stay in this group for a moment, but we say goodbye to the audience. Thank you all for joining us tonight or watching this afterwards. We will be back the next Thursday with actually already our last session of the double feature lecture series. Thank you and a good evening and happy Thanksgiving.